My name is Leonie Baldacchino. I am the director of the Edward de Bono Institute here at the University of Malta and the national host for Global Entrepreneurship Week here in Malta. So before we move on to today's session, just a little bit of information about Global Entrepreneurship Week for those of you who are not yet familiar with the initiative. This was initiated way back in 2008 and is now celebrated in 180 countries with an estimated 40,000 events and the participation of approximately 10 million people. This takes place every year in November, and since 2008, the Institute has been the national host for this initiative in Malta. Every year, we organize a number of events, usually in person. So we normally have seminars and conferences and networking and that sort of thing. But this year, of course, because of COVID, we too have opted to cope with COVID and adapt to the situation. And we still have a lineup of events all online, all on Zoom. Today is the first official event for Global Entrepreneurship Malta that has attracted quite a large number of participants. Many of you are students at the University of Malta taking our entrepreneurship lectures in a variety of different courses, including our Master in Creativity and Innovation and our Diploma in Creativity, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Others are taking different courses, including Degree Plus, Bachelors in Occupational Health and Safety, and other courses, and are taking study units offered by our institute as part of their course. So once again, welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. We are very pleased that through these events, we are now also a part of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, which brings together all the partners and all the participants that take part in Global Entrepreneurship Week, but encourages engagement, continued engagement with entrepreneurship and innovation all year round. So initially, the focus was just on this week in November. However, over the years, it became quite evident that this new movement, really this new network that was created, was engaged in quite a lot of activities, a lot of things all year round. So that was the start of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, and we are quite also proud to be a part of this. A few words about the program. So we started pretty much on time, and I allocated around 15 minutes for my brief introduction, after which we will move on to the first part of the panel discussion, during which I have prepared a number of questions for my panelists. Afterwards, we will take a 15-minute break, because as those of you who are students know that long time spent on Zoom can be quite tiring. So we will stop for a break. I can't offer you coffee, but you can, of course, go help yourselves, do whatever you need to refresh your bodies and minds. And then we will come back for the second part of the panel discussion, which is reserved entirely for questions from the audience. So as I was explaining earlier, please, by all means, as our panelists are sharing their very interesting experiences, I invite you to either take down notes on the questions that you would like to ask them after the break. So then you can raise your hand and I will give you the permission to speak. I will enable your microphone, or if you feel more comfortable, just typing them into the chat or into the Q&A and I will ask them on your behalf. Okay, so you have those two options. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed guests. And first of all, thank you all very much for taking the time in your busy schedules to join us this evening. First, in alphabetical order, no preferences for being obviously a colleague of mine here at the university, Dr. Engineer Mark Anthony Azzopardi, who is a senior lecturer at the Department of Electronic Systems Engineering. He is also the winner of the MDIA Award for Innovative Technologies in response to COVID-19. So he will be telling us more about his work, his research, and also how this research was adapted in adaptation in view of the pandemic. another colleague from the University of Malta, Christina Bohajar. She is a research support officer here at the Institute, where she helps out with 2 Erasmus projects, EU-funded projects. She is also a part-time visiting lecturer at the Institute and also a PhD candidate. And since that doesn't keep her busy at all, I also roped her into this panel discussion, and she will be sharing with us some of her research on how international companies have adapted to COVID-19. Mr. Simon Bohajar, who is the co-owner and commercial director at Tefit Tazza and Souvenirs That Don't Suck. This attracted my attention due to their Quarantina collection. I'm sure Simon will tell us a lot more about that later on. Mr. Marvin Gauci, who is a chef and founder of several restaurants, including Tarragon, Caviar and Bull, and most recently, Gourmet Malta. And last but certainly not least, Mr. David Shibaras, who is the founder of Invent 3D and the runner-up of the aforementioned MDIA Innovation Award. So once again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. And I will now stop sharing my screen and ask you the first question. So a general question for all of you. I gave a brief introduction to who you are and what you do, but can we please learn a little bit more about you in your own words? Shall we go in alphabetical order once again?
No problem, no problem. So, first of all, good evening to everybody. So I am Mark Azzopardi. I am from the Electronic Systems Engineering Department, as introduced by Leonie before. And we work on a number of projects which are related to innovation and product development, and in a sense, being engineers is very much tied to innovation, because it's part of the job description. As academics, we spend only part of our time lecturing. Most of it is spent on research, and a substantial portion of that is in product development related to that research.
Okay.
I'm on mute. Thank you, Mark. Christina?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Yes, so I work with Leonie on Project DIFME. So it stands for Digital Internationalization and Financial Literacy Skills. And what we do is research knowledge gaps micro-entrepreneurs have in terms of financial skills and digital internationalization. And what we aim to do through this project is create curriculum, which is obviously required by these micro-entrepreneurs to better their skills. We're also working on another EU project, ProBM2, which is aimed at business modeling curricula. And yes, I'm a PhD candidate, and I explore innovation in boutique hotels. So I explore how boutique hotels implement innovation through using knowledge resources.
Thank you, Christina. Simon?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Simon from Tefit Tazza and Souvenirs That Don't Suck. Tefit Tazza is a Maltese art studio focused on the Maltese identity. Souvenirs That Don't Suck, the name is quite self-explanatory. We try to have a fresh, original take on the Maltese souvenirs and Maltese tokens market. I personally am the commercial director and part owner of both brands. I take care of daily operations, but my passion and what I mostly try to take care of is growth, whether it's through HR, whether it's through marketing or other projects that come along from time to time.
Thank you, Simon. Marvin?
So, my name is Marvin Gauci, as yourself have already introduced me. I am a chef that turned into a restaurateur. I have restaurants in Malta and also restaurants in Budapest. Lately, the last three years, I was also appointed by the authorities as an ambassador for gastronomy and culinary for Malta, which was why we have Michelin in Malta right now. That was my project, and I worked on it for 3 years, and finally now we have Michelin in Malta. As you maybe might know, that I also had an agreement that once they come to Malta, I will completely disassociate myself from the project. The intention was that I bring them over here and that I put them in the right direction to the right people. And now the authorities have took it back in their hands, and I have nothing to do with it anymore, because obviously I don't want any conflict of interest. And apart from everything, I also had an agreement with Michelin that the first few years I will not get myself involved in the stars. So if they find my restaurants that are sufficiently good and they are willing to put them on the recommended restaurant, then they do that. But apart from that, I am out of the equation until obviously there is a couple of years, and I wanted to, the whole idea was that I bring Michelin to Malta, and that's what I did, and that's what I cared about.
Thank you, Marvin. David?
Hi, I'm David. I'm also an engineer. I finished my master's in integrated product development last year. I, along with my wife, we run Invent 3D for the past 2 years, August of 2018. So we do all things 3D printed. Anything to do with 3D printing, we do it here. So we do product design, prototyping, production runs. Right now we just moved into a larger space so we can cater for even more. Today we just unpacked another 20 printers. So now we have the largest print farm in Malta, and we use that to cater for local and international needs. And our specialty is 3D printed products, where people usually use 3D printing as either a toy or as just a prototype. We use it for the actual end product. And when we find a successful product that we're happy with, we market it in-house, we produce it in-house, we ship it worldwide. We also work with university on some projects. We do some R&D. We're just basically colossal nerds.
Thank you for that introduction to David. So as you can all see, we have a panel from very different backgrounds, but sharing one thing in common. The aim of today's session is to try to show that through creative thinking and through innovation, it is possible to adapt to the challenges that we are facing on an everyday basis, of course, but in particular, the focus of today's session is how to adapt and cope with the challenges that have been thrown at us thanks to the pandemic. The tendency of many people is to resign oneself and hope for the better, or to seek help, or to seek assistance. However, the entrepreneurial approach of dealing with any challenges, including COVID-19, is to look at different ways in which one can do whatever one does. Whether one is an entrepreneur in the strict sense of the word, whether one is a business owner, a business manager. So we have 3 entrepreneurs with us here, okay? Or whether one is an employee, or whether one is a researcher, right? So we have also a researcher who is also an intrapreneur. Those of you who are students would have heard me explain what this term is. So Mark is very entrepreneurial in his work here at the university. And also Christina is also very entrepreneurial in helping out with all the projects and helping us adapt what we do here as well. So I think I would like to start my questions now, first and foremost, with the entrepreneurs, with the business founders. So Simon, Marvin, and David, could you tell us what was the initial impact of COVID-19, especially when the first positive cases were found in Malta way back in March? How did that hit you? What was your initial reaction? And how did it impact your business at the beginning, first of all? Simon, would you like to go first?
Sure. It feels like a lifetime ago. First thing was acceptance, I think, and like getting an idea of what's going on around us. And I remember there were a couple of weeks where I don't know, like I don't know what hit us. We have a couple of retail stores. One of them, the one in Valletta, we had signed the contract for it a couple of weeks before the first case in Malta. So it was very easy for us to like panic and and lose ourselves. But after the first period of acceptance and after making sure that everyone in the team is okay and having some form of stability back, it helped. It forced us into adapting to different business opportunities. We took a decision early on to go on with our obligations with the shop in Valletta and decided to shift online. Like you mentioned, part of that shift was the Quarantina collection that actually was a really good success for us. And we had other initiatives. We offered a free handwritten card to help people stay connected to their loved ones. Um, we did a coloring book for free to help people stay engaged with us. We collaborated also with Malta Type. We did a new collection with them as well. And in general, we've been very active in arranging our strategy. So before, if strategy meetings used to happen every 3 months, there was a period where we were talking literally every week because the constant updates in health could change our plans drastically, I would say.
Was your target market initially locals or was it mostly tourists?
So we'd say we believe in research. So like I can give figures. I'd say 60% was tourists, and overnight it felt like we lost 60% of our revenue. And it's not just felt, we did lose 60% of our revenue. The rest are expats and locals. And also expats, especially in the beginning, we noticed there was a wave of expats who wanted to be next to their family because they didn't know if they could travel back. So yeah, the impact has been severe. Um, if we had stuck to our traditional business, I don't think that I would be here smiling and and being so optimistic about the future.
Yeah, so you had to pivot, you had to adapt and focus on the local market because that is who you could feasibly reach, really and truly.
Exactly.
And you mentioned the Quarantino collection and a few other initiatives. When we were having a preparation chat, you wanted to show some images. Is this a good time, or
Sure.
would you like to
Yes,
show
yes,
them
yes.
later on?
I'll share screen quickly. I think it's a good illustration of what happened over time. You should be seeing my screen. So this was the initial announcement. I'm actually really proud that we closed our retail store before the government imposed it on us, before the government even had announced that it was going to impose closing, just because the uncertainty with health was such that we felt the responsible thing to do was close so we keep our team members safe. And I think that we're reaping benefits now. We still have the same team. They stayed with us. I'm really happy about it, and we actually added to the team in the time from the time that Corona hit us. Um, then this is like the example of the coloring book. We were actually overwhelmed. I think we had over 50. It's not working well, but we had over 50 submissions for it. Let me stop the audio. We had these cards. We offered to do a free cards to help you stay connected with your loved ones while we were with quarantine and we couldn't go out for months. And this is a collection that we're mentioning. Basically, the best part, I think, of the COVID period for us was collaborations with people that maybe beforehand we felt were not that accessible to us. But with COVID, if the market kind of zeroized, everyone was searching for ways to create new markets. And we partnered up with Love in Malta, which is a giant in local media, and came up with this collection together. It's been a really successful collaboration. I think people appreciate that there's an element of humor, but also a seriousness to it. It's it just really worked. Did various products for it. It was a bit of a struggle with operations because during COVID, it's not like you can import products like you used to before. Or I still remember once I spent over 2 hours at Malta Post with 5 bags of orders trying to get everything out. But overall, we're really happy about this, and it has built a relationship that has been really beneficial to us, not just with Love in Malta, but with Love in Malta is a really good example of how COVID presented us with opportunities. And like I mentioned, this was the contract that we had signed in February this year. And now I'm really happy. Actually, I'm having this call from the Tefitazza space upstairs. We actually opened it in July. And obviously, retail is not what it used to be, but we're really proud. I can say I'm really proud of how we reacted to it. And I feel like against all odds, we came out as a stronger business, certainly more diversified. And I can't wait for things to not go back to normal, but for us to have a bit of a break with COVID, because I feel we really managed to take the business to the next level.
Very interesting, Simon. Thank you very much. I'll get back to you later on because if we have time, I'd also like to try to understand how you actually came up with the ideas to do all of this. But in the interest of giving everyone time to speak, we'll do a round and then we'll come back. Marvin, would you like to go next? You are operating in another sector that is very hard hit by the pandemic. I mean, for quite a long time, you had to close your restaurants. How did that impact you? I mean, what was your initial reaction to it, and how did you gradually adapt?
So basically, one thing that happened to me and obviously my sector, I think maybe like Simon, we were really affected. First of all, I want to start by saying that this year, January and February, both in Malta and also Budapest, we were extremely successful. We had a turnover of 35% more than what we normally get from previous years. So whatever we did last year to make sure that this year would be strong was actually giving the fruit. Unfortunately, when March kicked in, we were completely closed by the authorities. We had to immediately come up with something to do. First of all, I had a decision. Either I will close the restaurants, fire everyone, and open them whenever whenever I can, or whenever I deem fit that business is going to come back to some sort of normality, or try and hold everybody's jobs and try to reinvent ourselves somehow. Obviously, it's a little bit different because we offer an experience. And so offering a takeaway from my restaurants was not my first preference, but I had no choice to adapt to this way because I wanted to keep everybody's job, because when you go to Tarragon, Caviar and Bull, Susurrus, and they're quite, service orientated restaurants. And obviously you cannot get a service like that if you have somebody bringing you the food in a box and that's it, you know what I mean? So it was a very difficult decision for me. I never ever had thought that I would end up selling takeaway food from my restaurants. It was something that I really had to cut both my arms to do. But finally, I decided that, with help obviously of my management, that this was the best way, but not for the business, but for the people around us. So we kept everybody, thanks to the government that he helped us with, obviously wages. I mean, it's so complicated. There was a lot of admin work to be done. I cannot express how frustrated my administration team was to try and figure out how certain things were and how they. It helped us also to fix any, any things that were not clear in administration also. So we learned from it as well. But we had to take the decision that, okay, now, guys, you cannot come to Tarragon and give you the service, open the wine and give you a taste and this and that and the other, but we're going to bring you food in a box, which was, I mean, if you had to tell me, yeah, was it successful? I'll tell you it was and it wasn't. Why? Because from 100% turnover, obviously we had a 10% turnover or a 7% turnover or something like this. Obviously, we knew that that would be the case. Thankfully, we had a very good January and February that helped us with the process of doing this and not really have to, organize anything else to try and keep everybody floating. So it was a real difficult moment for me and for my team. It was like a roller coaster, like Simon said before. We had to do something. I don't know whether it was a good decision or maybe a not so much good decision, but the best thing that came out of it was that all the team was brought together somehow, and at least they had something to do. They didn't feel like they were on a thread going to fall. So if you had to ask me, was it successful, the takeaway business and this, I would tell you no. Was it successful for you as an entrepreneur and as a 7-restaurant holder and these things? I would tell you yes, because I managed to keep the team from going crazy. Number one, from losing their job. Number two, and with that, we created a light in the end of the tunnel.
Yes, it also shows empathy and compassion on your part, Marvin. This was a discussion that I had with some students in a lecture very recently. How do empathy and compassion play into business? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Maybe from a bottom line perspective, at the moment, it's not, it's far from ideal, but looking at the big picture, I'm sure that your employees really appreciate your efforts and really appreciate that you try to keep the business afloat. And I'm sure that they are all doing their best to return your goodwill as well.
I can honestly tell you that we did it because of the main management, because as everybody knows that today in the industry, a lot of people are not from Malta, but they are foreigners that work in Malta, and they give a service to Maltese restaurants. And unfortunately, I think that all the people that I have kept from them, there's maybe 30% left, because 70% obviously went back to some their countries. Obviously, we didn't fire anybody, but obviously they felt the need to go to their families or to do something else, or to even change jobs and take other. They maybe felt that it's not so secure being working in the industry. So yeah, it was not only done for the people that were working for us, but it was also done to show everyone that we are not a company that are just going to close the doors. Obviously, it would have been much cheaper for the companies to do that, but we didn't, because we wanted to, in the future, show and it was on the present that we are a company that you can rely on.
That's great. Thank you very much, Marvin. I'll get back to you later on. Aldo, I can see that you have your hand raised, but I'm reserving questions from the audience for after the break, please. So please remember what you would like to ask. Thanks, Aaron.
Can I interrupt? Just
yeah.
I think it's a really good question what you asked about empathy, and I love Marvin's reply. I think it's a matter of short term and long term. If you only think about short term, empathy might not make sense, right? if you've been in business enough and if you know people enough, that's the only way to go. Like with COVID, if you were someone who never showed empathy, if you never took care of your people, the moment that you needed them to adjust with the wage supplement levels and everything else, then you would have realized that actually, even from a business point of view, it's the only way to go.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you for that, Simon, as well. David, over to you. Congratulations on the award. Did that came in around June, I believe. So had you already adapted to COVID, or how did that happen exactly? So can you walk us through the process?
I could. Let me just share my screen with you. I just prepared some brief images of what we were doing. Can you see?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So basically, as COVID started abroad, that's when we sort of knew what we could do. Now, as someone in manufacturing, I saw that abroad, and as we know, the supply chains were breaking down, and they started breaking down early on. We saw that abroad there was this intense need for these visors. We realized this from like Prusa. Prusa is a Czech Republic company. They develop printers, and we saw that they put out an open source design and donated to the healthcare services. From my end, when I saw that, I got in touch with a couple of ministers. This was before we even had our first case in Malta. Basically telling them that this is something that we can definitely help with. And then, in fact, we went from sort of having a brief idea of what they want. So we basically redesigned this open source design to Mater Dei's specs, because every country has different specs as to what they want. And from there, we ended up, after 3 days of design work and iterative prototyping, we ended up with a design that satisfied Mater Dei, CPSU, and the infection control unit, which is basically what you need. We didn't just get a sheet of plastic and strap it to our face. As Mark said, it's as an engineer, it has to be innovative, it has to be good, it has to work. So the first thing that we pursued was approval from the bodies. If I can't just come up to you and tell you I designed the face shield, that works, buy it. But the whole point of this was to donate to Mater Dei. We made a Kickstarter, we made an Indiegogo campaign, which was very successful. We raised 5,000 euros in donations. But essentially, we got a lot of material donated to us from abroad. We felt the plastic shortage quite early on in the year. We felt the plastic shortage coming in January, February, when we started ordering for our own projects, and sort of nothing could come through within 3-4 months. And then we felt the shortage of the plastic sheets, where we had to reach out to various sources in the industry to sort of help us source more plastic. For example, we went to Multi-Trade, we took its entire stock. We then ended up speaking to Polydano Press, and then we went with an agreement where they were cutting the plastic for us as well. But these things cost a lot of money. We donated 10,000 visors to Mater Dei and various pharmacies. We donated to the pharmacies, we donated to Mater Dei, because the whole point of this wasn't to make money. It was to help the healthcare services cope until the production of China, wherever, the production of PPE starts again properly. So ours was just an interim solution, which is still being used till today. We visited Mater Dei recently, and we see that some of them are still in circulation, because we designed them to be reusable. Aside from the plastic sheet on the front, the 3D printed part is reusable. They can sterilize it by immersing it in isopropyl alcohol, and that to them was good enough. So that was great. And the way we managed so many visors, at one point we were churning out 200 to 300 per day. We basically had our own print farm, which wasn't as big as it is now. It was around 50, 60 printers going non-stop every day. We also reached out to the community, the 3D printing community. And what this meant was that myself and a couple of friends were going around Malta on a daily basis, either picking up 3D printed visors or dropping them off to Mater Dei. This is my family who basically assembled the largest percentage of the Mater Dei ones. From there, well, this is how small our office was. This is how crammed we were in that tiny office. Our first office was 16 square meters. You can imagine it got a bit stuffy. One of us was actually living in the office because he lives with, his parents are over 80, so he had to sleep in the office. But to be honest, it was a fun time. Exhausting, but rewarding. From here, we ended up getting in contact with various entities, such as schools. The US Embassy offered us their printers, where we assembled in the Zabbar Primary School, which is right next door to where our old office was, an entire army of printers that were taken from schools. All these schools were closed. We pulled all the printers from there. We put them in a room. We tripped the circuit breaker of this school about 16 times because it just couldn't handle this amount of power and wattage. The room glowed at night from the Ultimakers. We got filament donated from our material partners, Polymaker. But this was us. This was us for 16, 20 hours a day for a good couple of months. This print farm lasted about 2 months, and we churned out a lot of visors from it. Since then, obviously, it's been taken back to the schools and used. Yeah, this was us. We'd assemble them all over there. We bought the straps, we bought the visors, and basically we used sales to private entities to fund the Mater Dei ones. It wasn't a cash grab, as many people started telling us. We had people from the injection molding industry threatened us, told us to stop, because we were taking their business, which we weren't. We were donating everything. And yeah, it was tiring, it was stressful, but it was very rewarding. From here, as we had developed this great relationship with Mater Dei, we developed respiratory adapters. Now, what this was, basically, we were approached by a couple of consultants telling us that they have these old respirators from the Ebola era. And what they wanted to was to get these modern filters and attach them to these respirators while retaining their functionality. What we ended up with were respirators that functioned better than original with modern filters. All 3D printed, everything was designed to standard. And basically, this is Mater Dei's first 3D printed product that they're using right now regularly. When they approached us about it, they were very willing to experiment with 3D printing, which is something that locally was unheard of. Locally, 3D printing is still seen as a toy. Well, luckily, we've managed to change that quite a bit. And basically, what this was, this is what the respirator looks like. And this is us assembling the first prototype. It's worth noting, we picked up the prototype on a Thursday evening. Sorry, we picked up the respirator on a Thursday evening, and by Friday afternoon, we had working prototypes in our hands. We worked through the night, we got the designs working. You know, it was challenging because we couldn't find any information on the respirators. We had to reverse engineer it, we had to flow test it, and this is basically what they were on their hoods. The comments from infection control were that they're much more comfortable than what they are used to, in the sense that where someone was usually claustrophobic wearing these, the person who tried them tried it for 4 hours straight with no issues. There were 2 different types of respirators, though, that one and there was this one. Basically, they had to make do with what they had, because ordering these in was not an option at that time. They did not exist. Respirators cost, they're very expensive. So we basically took something that to them would have been scrap, and we made it ultra useful again for them. And everything is designed to standard, everything fits perfectly, everything is airtight, everything is designed, especially this filter. This is one of the older covers, where basically they asked us that basically they wanted so that when they put it on, they do not have to take it off again, because if they remove this cover, they have to throw away the filter. And since filters were such in short demand, we designed a cover that fits on. It covers everything from splashes. You can give it a quick wipe and you can use it again. I think I've spoken enough. Battilkom raskom, imma that's basically it. That's what we do. We innovate, and we're continuing that on a daily basis.
Very interesting, David. Thank you very much for that. So for a time, you were actually a social enterprise. You adapted your business production, and you were giving them away for free, which is what we would refer to as social entrepreneurship, or social innovation.
David, can I just stop this? I am overwhelmed, really overwhelmed. Well done, and I got the goosebumps. So I'd like to invite you and your team for dinner in one of my restaurants. I'm really overwhelmed. Well done, really well done. I am so happy that you managed to do something like this. That I don't know what to say. I really, you inspired me a lot today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that, Marvin. Yes, you're right. Very inspiring indeed.
It's the first time that I heard it, so this needs to be told. The story needs to be said.
Hence why he is here, Marvin, giving him a voice. So hopefully this will be more widely known after today's event.
Very well done.
Mark, another very interesting technology that you have developed also in the healthcare as a contribution to healthcare, but from a different departure point, from the world of academia. Would you like to talk about this?
So initially, going over the beginnings of it, we started feeling the effects of the pandemic quite early, as David mentioned. The effects in the supply chains started affecting us quite quickly. So many of our projects started faltering fairly early in the year, and we also were expecting the disruption that we eventually saw, because all our eyes were on China, and that's where most of our supplies come from. So I was literally following what's happening in China hour by hour. So we could see that what was happening there was very likely going to end up happening here, and it was probably going to become even worse. So it didn't take long before we started thinking about how we could adapt to this impending scenario. As far as our research activities go, we had to adapt in the sense that we had to reshuffle our work so that the portions which can happen offline, which can happen at students and researchers' homes, take precedence, and obviously the access to laboratories had to be reduced considerably. With that, we started loaning equipment and starting creating weekly meetings over Zoom and Skype and whatever, to be able to find a new way of operating. And on the whole, I think we managed. But in the meantime, with many of the activities, our research activities coming to, slowing down, let's put it that way, we also started looking at what we're going to do on a national level, because also on a personal level, it so happens that some of my family members are work in the medical field, and they were also facing the problem of PPE shortages. So we're scrambling and trying to find solutions to that, and it was pretty obvious that the PPE that was available wouldn't have lasted very long before ending up in a big problem. And as you probably followed in the news, countries were backstabbing each other left, right, and center. Everybody trying to get hold of all the PPE production that was available worldwide. You know, the whole planefuls of PPE were disappearing on the airfields. So it was heating up a lot. So that meant that the little PPE we had in Malta, and also in some households, it had to be reused somehow. And this was a big issue because PPE, especially when dealing with a special kind of PPE, I mean respirator masks in particular, they are meant to be disposable. So can you imagine if you have a whole ward of health workers wearing these respirators, and each time they change shift or each time they exit the contaminated area, they need to remove it, throw it away, and wear a new one. And at the same time, it's impossible to buy new ones. So your stock is going to be depleted in a very short time. And then what comes later is, what would come next is you facing the situation of either having to wear masks and surgical masks or other face coverings which were not up to standard, or else you having to rewear contaminated masks, contaminated respirator masks, which is also a problem. That is obviously going to put you at risk. So we had to find a solution to this. The first beginnings of our ideas started literally at home. I converted some cabinets into UV exposure boxes to irradiate the exteriors of these masks with ultraviolet. And then after a while, my sister told me, listen, this is a serious problem all over in our polyclinic and probably everywhere else. Why don't you try to scale it up and see how we could you could make an impact beyond our little circle? And that's what we did then. We quickly, started from a back of the envelope sketch. We came up with a design. We very quickly put together a device which we could build using the materials that were available during, lockdown. That meant that everything had to be built using materials that were in stock locally. So it's not just a question of designing anything fanciful, anything that tickles your fancy. What you need to do at the end of the day is design something that can be built with what you can find in local hardware stores, with what you can adapt from materials you can basically scavenge from here and there in sufficient quantities to be able to fulfill the need. So we came up with a quick prototype. We very quickly, within a week, basically, we put together the device. We announced it on a press release, and within 3 hours, we were receiving emails from the CEO of the hospital, to the rector, to us, and an infectious disease unit and the infection control unit, asking for more details about this. So that basically meant that the demand existed. So that was the objective of this, basically, to see whether the demand existed. And there was a lot of noise, obviously, in the media. So getting through to the right people was going to be very difficult, and the only way would be to use the media themselves to publicize the idea and then let them come over if there was a real need, and there was. So then within 2 or 3 days, we went over to hospital to show them the device. They were very, very interested. They gave us some tips of how they would use it, and we quickly went back to readapt the unit. At the same time, in parallel, we were also looking at what's happening around the world, basically, and other groups were also toying with this idea, and I can show a few slides later, perhaps, on what other groups developed. And the project moved along well. We basically set up a small production line to develop these units within the department, which was at that moment devoid of students. So we had the time and the space to do it. And we supplied the hospital with a number of mask disinfectors that could process a large quantity of these masks within the wards.
Very interesting, Mark. So has the idea actually been commercialized? I mean, is it prototyped? What's
yes. Perhaps I can share. I think that would help.
Yes.
So
I am overwhelmed now. I mean, I must have been in another world through all this. I have no idea of what David Shiberaz was doing, and neither what you, Mark Anthony. I'm oblivious to it all. I was so focused to obviously do what I was doing.
Well, I can imagine in the restaurateur industry, it must have been quite an experience to deal with this.
Yeah, I'm sure you had more than enough happening around you, Marvin, and to keep your business going. It would have been very easy to miss stuff that was going on outside your industry, I'm sure.
I think it was also a choice. After 3 weeks, I unfollowed all the news portals. I closed I didn't want to hear anymore, just focusing obviously how I was going to survive my staff's and my colleagues' jobs. You know what I mean? That was my main focus.
Yes.
So I actually, let's continue, sorry.
So basically what I wanted to highlight here is that the face coverings we use and surgical masks in particular, and the face covering, the cloth face coverings we use are very easy to clean because you just wash them and that's it. But when it comes to these respirators, there are it becomes quite tricky because the materials that these devices are made from are quite particular. They are susceptible to damage very easily. So it's not, if you wet them, if you try to sterilize them with alcohol or whatever, or you try to wash them, you will destroy their properties without anything visible appearing on the masks. So you might think that you have a high performance mask, but in reality you will no longer have a high performance mask. So this is what one of the main issues we're facing, because many of the medical professionals were using these units, and some were actually experimenting with alcohol, wiping them, because of course there is a complex technology which many people are not quite aware of. And this was one of the things that started worrying us. So basically these devices are made in a number of layers, and some of the layers in the middle of the masks, okay, the inner layers are electrostatically charged, and that is what's at stake basically when these masks are misused, are basically washed in inappropriate ways. These layers can lose their electrostatic properties, and therefore they will lose their ability to trap particles, and therefore they will no longer be N95 masks. They will become something like N25 masks. Okay, and it's not something that you will observe by looking at the mask. It will just you will just get infected, and you will start wondering why. that was the problem. So that's the structure of the masks, okay? As I said, made in layers. And so the ultraviolet technology we were looking at was one of various candidate technologies that we could use to disinfect masks. Other techniques that can be used, for example, there are various techniques that use chemicals, that use hydrogen peroxide or steam or various other techniques. But many of these are not well adapted to the particular scenario. If you use chemicals on a mask, which then has to be reworn, you have to keep in mind you're going to breathe whatever remnants of the chemicals are still in the masks. So we wanted to use something which is chemical free and still make still ensure that the process is safe. At the same time, we were working outside of norms, outside of certification. We are essentially misusing a product. The masks are meant to be thrown away. They are disposable. So reusing the masks is automatically losing any guarantee that the manufacturer is going to provide. This is a last resort solution. So, it was a bit of a quandary. What do you do? End up with no masks or defy the product use criteria? So basically, we started looking at a body of research that other groups had looked into in previous, in SARS-1, for example, in the previous
pandemic.
But not pandemic, it was an epidemic, but localized. Hopefully, luckily it did not spread this far. But people could start predicting that if this was going to happen, if such a virus was going to spread globally, there would have been a run on supplies, and so people started looking at the options. So that's all we had to work on, about maybe a couple of dozen papers, but they were enough to give us some reassurance that these techniques would have worked well. Since March, there has been an enormity of research on this topic, and in fact, the technique was in fact confirmed. What I wanted to say in terms of innovation is that very often you happen to be at the right place at the right time, because you would have had a previous exposure to various things. In my case, I was previously exposed to ultraviolet technology in water treatment, and I was previously exposed to these mask technologies because I had used them elsewhere. And it's a question of joining the dots. It's not just you don't just pop out of nowhere, a light bulb comes on and there you go, you have a product. You have to have the right mix of
knowledge and creativity.
Yes. Mark, in fact, that is exactly what I tell our students as well, that yes, definite creativity is about joining the dots, making connections between seemingly unrelated concepts, events, technologies in your case. But what you said about being at the right place at the right time, I suppose an element of serendipity, surely. Some people say it's luck, but I always say that luck favors the prepared mind, no? So in your case, you were most certainly very well prepared, and you were also very alert to what was taking place. You knew what was happening. You were looking out for these.
Yes, I was looking out for solutions, and I could draw on some experience. At the same time, I wanted to do something to try to sort out a problem which was going to hit us like a speeding train. So I could have easily just sat in my cocoon at home and kept on with my busy research agenda. But at the end of the day, it's a question of trying to help out in a situation where people were literally desperate, because you can imagine what was going to happen if you have a ward full of dying patients, and you would know that going anywhere near them without PPE is going to be not a death sentence, but definitely near certain infection.
Yeah, certainly. Mark, really fascinating, impressive research, although I am conscious of time and it's suddenly feeling like perhaps the 2.5 hours that I allocated for this might not be enough. I thought it would be too much, but perhaps this is also interesting. We have started eating into the break time, but before we go for a break, I would like to invite Christina to share some slides with us. She has carried out some research on the international scene. Although what you guys are doing here in Malta is very impressive, so we don't, you know, we have more than enough inspiration from here. But Christina, maybe you can share some examples of innovative product, services, campaigns from overseas as well. After that, we'll stop for our 10 to 15 minutes break.
Okay, great. I'll keep it nice and short. Mark, may you please unshare your screen?
Oh, yes, yes. Let me find my meeting controls. Stop the share, okay?
Thank you. Okay, so I won't be going through all these sites because I was very ambitious with the amount I put together. But what I can tell you from the onset of my research is that Corona has basically presented a situation for enterprises where it's unfortunately a sink or swim, and the swim for most companies has been a jet ski. So it has actually catalyzed innovation beyond precedented levels. So we have accelerated rates of innovation from a global scale. So we have seen, for example, retail, which, as you rightly pointed out, Simon, has been hard hit. So what we've seen is apps which focus on integrating users together. So whereas I would usually go shopping with my family and it would be a social event, they've also in this platform created a social space for people to get together and poll whether they like each other's clothes. So you create that community feel, and my friends get to still vote on my clothes and tell me, yes, it's great or no. So, you know, you have these communities emerging online. In an attempt to save the work of garment workers, unfortunately, in Bangladesh, who depend on an income, you also have quite a few CSR campaigns being developed, which is corporate social responsibility. So instead of throwing unused stock out, what these Bangladeshi factories did was start producing like boxes, like care packages, but of clothes, and they would sell them online. These took off and obviously still kept the livelihoods of Bangladeshi employees kind of over there. So they still had revenue coming in. And this one's for you, Marvin. There is a website for positive news only, so feel free to click on it. You will only find happy news over there. LVMH, when there was basically a shortage of hand sanitizers, switched their perfumery production to developing hand sanitizers. So they completely readapted the market offering. And then we have the decentralization of knowledge. So we're saying knowledge become widely available for employees. And another innovation, which is probably it's really cute. It's Lush created, they readapted their soap. So instead of having the large soap, we're supposed to wash our hands for 30 seconds right now. What they did was they created 30-second soap. So it literally dissolves within 30 seconds and you're done. So your mind's at ease straight away and you're happy about it.
Very good.
Okay, so I'll go through a few innovations in the tourism industry. Let's go through some slides. I'll get to the more fun slides. So the tourism industry was largely criticized, unfortunately, for the way it handled the COVID situation. This is a very interesting campaign, not a government campaign, but there were two marketing creatives basically came together and found a way they wanted to find a way to keep people inside. Because no one was sticking to the social distancing measures. So what they did was use colorful language and create this set of retro-looking postcards. And I mean, this campaign went viral, and it's a very, it's a simple way to effectively communicate that, listen, now's not really the time to travel and go out, stay in. Some more of their work. I will show this really great campaign by Iceland. So Iceland developed this campaign on primal therapy. Primal therapy is basically you scream and you let out all your stress. Leonie, I'm going to try it on our roof sometime next week when this week's over.
Whenever you want, Christina, I'll join you.
So basically, what they wanted to show was it's been a really stressful time. We all need to let it out. We need to scream. And it shows the scenery of Iceland and how beautiful it is. And that, even though there's a pandemic, you can still travel there with them abiding to the restrictions because it's so large. what they do, and if you don't manage to get there, they've set up 7 large speakers around different parts of Iceland. So they have a website online where you can actually scream into your phone. It will be played out on one of these 7 different speakers. But let me show you the advert because it explains it better than I could.
Continue. Please. Yes.
Anyway, you get the point. That's
They get
it.
the point.
Sorry. So if you go onto their website, you can genuinely scream. It will be played. And I mean, it's interesting. You can listen to all the other screams so if you want. So New Zealand they have created some amazing campaigns. Their first campaign was obviously targeted at maintaining everyone like kind of inside the house. So they focused on creating close bonds. But now their main area of focus is on domestic tourism. So what they want to do is reconnect citizens with their local environment. So there's this great trend on Twitter, basically hashtag do something New Zealand. And it's encouraging people to try out things they would have never tried out, which is a really good way to get tourism up and running again within this industry. A few more examples. So we're seeing a lot of very interesting live streaming things happening. So we're seeing in the entertainment sector, we have like online raves, which are very interesting. In fact, I've checked all these out. So I went on this Insomniac TV and I'm like, oh my goodness, it really is a rave. So we're seeing online raves, you have people getting together and it's live streaming. Spotify released a concert function in collaboration with Songkick and Ticketmaster, and it is actually legit. So I've tried it out. You can buy tickets and it's streamed. It's very, it's a very interesting option to attend a concert. So that's also a very nice option. We've seen some other very interesting options, such as the drive-in cinemas, which offered shopping complexes, very large ones, for example, with outdoor parking, the option to generate revenue to renting out the car park. And obviously, it still provided individuals with a shared entertainment experience, because we always go to the cinema for that shared entertainment feeling. So this kind of brought it back in a very safe and contained environment. We have virtual museums. Feel free to browse them. There are around 500 now, offered through the Arts and Culture Initiative offered by Google. And you have the Vatican Museum. To be honest, it's really interesting, this one, the way it's done. It's very crisp. I'd recommend going on all of these. As someone who's tried out everything over here, go on it. So this one is probably of interest to Marvin. So it's obviously bars and restaurants, which were severely hit, and you have some very interesting offerings. Had I known about this before, the Stay Real bar, where you can go grab a drink online, live stream it, and feel like you're, within the community. So it connects you to other people. It's like an online club, I guess. So we've got online bars, and then we've got market offerings such as Canlis, who's actually a fine dining restaurant in the US, who provides courses now, cooking courses, which is great. And they also create kits. So they'll give you food kits and you create your own food. We've seen the emergence of virtual tour guides. So the tour guide functions like an educational platform. It's like a holiday, but not in the country. So it offers you a holiday experience. You're just not there. So I can be in my house like I am now, go on the website, and I will be paired with a local tour guide who will give me a tour of the area.
Wow.
Now, other option, Smart Guide, is actually Smart Guide is a software, right? But if I'm a tourism operator, I'm allowed to upload my own tour on that. So when I travel to another country, I can just, and then it's like the Uber for tour guides. So I just go on this app, see what tour I want to actually go on, and I can do it virtually. But it's a software company which has decentralized tourism. So tourism providers can go there and create their own market offering because they have been severely hit by this pandemic. They only were good.
Go on.
I mean, I'm good. I can continue. I have a lot more slides, but the main point I want to get across with something like tourism industry is that collaboration is essential because it's one big product that they're selling. So if one thing changes within tourism industry, many things change. And I feel like they've really come together in a great way. I think there's more work to be done, but innovation has been, we've unfortunately only been exposed to not the most innovative campaigns, so I feel like I haven't. But when you look at worldwide, how we're tackling it on a worldwide basis, tourism and the different methods, countries are tackling it, innovation's been substantial in that.
And have you prepared slides on other industries as well, Christina? Maybe the last couple of minutes before we stop for a break?
Yes, I do. I have slides on other industries, but it's tourism industry, as in different parts of tourism industry. But it's, okay. I mean, again, it's more like just showing how you need to network, as you need to join networks for resources, because that's where you're going to be able to get your resources from.
Okay, so let me suggest that we stop for a break. After we get back from the break, as promised, I will give the attendees the opportunity to ask questions, and then if we have any more time at the end, we can perhaps show a few more of your slides. So, right, everyone, I think we'll cut down the break to 10 minutes rather than 15, so it is now 6:45. We will be back online at 6:55. So I am just going to turn off my mic and my camera, okay? And we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I see that all the attendees are still here, and we already have one raised hand from Aldo Buzuttil. So we can kick off straight away with the questions from the audience. Aldo.
Hello, good evening. Tismawni?
Eva, good evening.
L-ewwel ħaġa nirringrazzja lilek Leoni u Kristina tal-li ġibtilna dawn il-mistednin interessantissimi ħafna fuq il-prodotti tagħhom u l-innovazzjoni li irnexxilhom jikkreaw din is-sitwazzjoni ta' pandemija qegħdin fiha. Ma rridx noħu ħafna ħin għax inkella l-kollegi sħabi u jgħidu li jiena dejjem impaxpaxin noħodha fit-tul, però għandi żewġ mistoqsijiet, waħda għal Marvin u l-oħra forsi suġġeriment lil David. Ħanibda naqra ta' David, għax qasira forsi ma' suġġeriment. Mela, David, proset tal-prodott, jiena kont wieħed minn dawk tal-bidu li xtrajt dawk il-visors, alright, kemm għalija u kemm għall-familja kollha, sibthom utili ħafna, jiena bħala first aider ngħidlek il-verità. Użajta 3 darbiet fuq it-triq, right? Għax insomma fil-affarijiet fil-basket fil-barzaka tal-first aid, suġġeriment forsi ma nafx jekk jistax isir jew le, mhux biex nikkritika, don't get me wrong. Imma il-visor jista' jsirila xi tip ta' lock illi tintrabat mal-frame, mal-head, jien għandek il-ħodur tal-bidu ngħidilhom hekk. U tista' biex il-visor ma tinqalax għax issir loose minn dak il-clips tagħha u jekk forsi il-materjal jistax jiġi naqra iktar b'saħħtu li bis-sħana tax-xemx forsi ma għax tiegħi imbarmet. nkun li dritt. Issa di tkun fil-basket tal-first aid fil-basket kbir insomma fuq wara tal-karozza. Dik ta'
Can I just interrupt one moment? We have some attendees who are non-Maltese speakers. So for their benefit, I will very briefly translate the comment. And David, if you could
Sorry.
answer in English. Aldo, if you could ask the next question in English, I would appreciate it. Otherwise, if you prefer speaking in Maltese, I will once again do my best to translate. So David had, Aldo had some feedback for David where he said that he was one of the first who bought these visors as he is a first aider. And he had a suggestion, a minor suggestion for improvement to perhaps include a lock to strengthen the material of the visor, if I understood correctly. So perhaps David could please respond to that.
Yes, so basically the materials issue we were aware of. The reason we used the material that we chose was it is the material that everyone we knew could print. So there are the materials that we use on a day-to-day basis that can withstand up to 200 degrees Celsius. We use them for engine parts, we use them for that kind of stuff, fire retardant properties. But the point of the visor was to be quick and to be sort of there until the actual manufactured visors come out. So the material we chose is PLA, which you can't leave in the car. That sort of disintegrates. It doesn't hold up to 40 degrees heat, which is something we noticed, we knew would happen as time passes. But as you said, even in the beginning, we were cutting all our visors by hand. What that means is that we printed a jig with a couple of single hole punches, which pressed all the buttons, all the punches at the same time, but we had to locate them by hand. Everything was done in quite a rush, as you can imagine. So not all of them were perfect. Far from it. These were ranged. We had about 30 to 40 people who pitched in their help with their 3D printers. Almost everyone with a printer in Malta pitched in their help. There were some people who didn't want to help. Like I said, we got materials donated from all our partners. Obviously, we didn't have any say over what material got donated to us. So we got material that was PETG, which can withstand temperatures. We got material that is PLA, which could be printed by anyone with a printer. Our own, we're all printed in PETG and sort of what we could find as materials. The supply chain did not allow us to be picky with our material choices. It was either PLA or nothing, basically. And the PLA we bought was in huge quantities, 5 kilo rolls, 10 kilo rolls. And that's sort of what we had to work with. I think I answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. I apologize for putting my question in Maltese. So thank you, and thank you for your explanation. The second question is for Marvin, please. Good evening, Marvin. I know the hotel industry, the tourism industry was a very, very, very big difficulty for you restaurant owners. But for sure, I know you, all right, as Marvin, as one of your frequent clients, and we also work together sometimes. What I would like to for maybe give us an explanation. I know also that recently you opened the takeaway restaurant next to your restaurants that you have very near Corinthia and St. Julian's by the name of Don Royal. I need to come and taste your good pizza for sure. I'm not making any adverts, but I can recommend, and I know the hands, Marvin's hands. What about the question is? I know you have restaurants away abroad from Malta. What was the situation within the countries, and how did you manage the COVID again with foreign employees working with you in that foreign country. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your very nice comments. Secondly, I'll go immediately to the answer. And it was very, very difficult to be able to not communicate, but also understanding what path we were going to take. Until very recently, Budapest obviously at the beginning it was lockdown, and they closed our restaurants like they closed our restaurants over here, which we kept everybody, and obviously we supported everybody as best as we could. We've one of the new restaurants that was finalized at the beginning of COVID was a chef's journey, whereby it's this, Mark, it's very interesting also for you, Mark Anthony, because it's quite technological. It's a restaurant that it's 360 degrees projected on the wall, whereby we take you through a chef's journey from one country to the other. Every 25 minutes, we change a different country, and we have 8 countries. And we will take you there with culture, with atmosphere, with visuals, with audio, with food, and with drink of each and every designated country. Which was when we reopened the restaurants, when the authorities reopened the restaurants, this was quite a success, you know, because people couldn't go abroad, so they went there and they felt a little piece of every country in very short 2.5 hours or 2 hours of the experience. Unfortunately, I could not do takeaway for this experience, as I tried to explain earlier. This is something that you cannot put in a box and give it to somebody's house. But what we did was we opened Caviar and Bull on different channels, whereby we could sell our food, and we obviously served it as takeaway, which again, it wasn't such a big success, but it was a light at the end of the tunnel for the staff, and to at least do something. Unfortunately, now we are closed. There's another lockdown, and we don't know when it's going to end. Some say it will end in December, some say it will end in March. So a decision had to be taken, and have to be taken because it hasn't been taken yet. We either going to close the restaurant until the tourism reopens, or else we need to figure something out of what we're going to do. So it was extremely difficult. Obviously, over here, I am Maltese. I am 41 years old, and if I am stuck with something, I grab the phone, and I have the telephone of all the people that can eventually, or I don't know the word, that can help me. I grab the phone, I call them, how can I do this? Boom, 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 boom. They help me, and it's done. But in Budapest, it's completely different. You know, I've been there 4 years. It's true, running businesses for 4 years over there. But I don't have on my back end call telephone numbers of all the people that I know over here. Over here, I know from the authorities, because obviously I've been an ambassador for the last 3 years. So I have contacts of every authority, I have doors over here. Over there, it's a different story. The only people that I have is the general manager of the hotel, which I would like to thank him from here, and also all the Corinthia top management, that they helped me a lot to be able to survive, and that's it. You know, so when I needed something, I had to ask one of the employees, can you please try and organize this? And these are either restaurant manager or a chef, the executive chef, or any of the other staff. So I was very, very limited. So it was kind of impossible, you know what I mean? Thankfully enough, over here, businesses in Malta until today, I didn't lose a lot of money, so I could kind of, you know, lose a little bit money over there. You know what I mean?
Marvin, it's really interesting to hear you say this, and this applies to all of you actually. You are all saying, you're talking about the application of a lot of what we discuss in class. In fact, one of the students actually texted me during the break saying, you know, we discussed so much of this from a theoretical perspective in class, and you are really showing how it pans out in real life. So, for example, what you're saying now, Marvin, about, you know, being in Malta, you know, you have your network, you know many people, you can pick up the phone. We were talking about the small island state context just yesterday in class, and in a way, it can be viewed as a disadvantage because of our limited domestic market and associated challenges. But in another way, you know, knowing so many people in such such close proximity as well can work to one's advantage. So very interesting. I promised that the attendees would ask questions, but I wanted to ask you one earlier on about Gourmet Malta. So
Yes.
what are you doing exactly with Gourmet Malta? Is this the takeaway service that you have been mentioning, or is there something more to it?
So when we opened, when my first idea of Gourmet Malta was that we will prepare kits for people to be able to create an environment whereby they would be able to heat up or kits to prepare meals for their family instead of coming to my restaurant and have a focused dinner over there. They could do it at home with the kids, and they buy a set, it's a set menu of 4 or 5 courses. I think it was like €30, nothing to break the bank, but we did really, really well. We delivered so many packages for people to be able to kind of recreate what we created in all the restaurants, where obviously there are people that are, for them it was like a challenge to do it, and there are people it's too much hassle, you know what I mean? If I wanted to go to Tarragona or Caviar and Bull or Susurrus or whatever, you know, I want to go there, or I want one of the chefs to come over here.
But it's quite an innovative offering. I mean, it's not exactly a takeaway. It's not.
No. It started like that. Then obviously I had to put that on the side of the screen that was available, and we also had to make ready meals. People call us, I want this, I want that, and I want that. Within an hour and a half or an hour, you receive your food in takeaway boxes and you eat. So,
and what level of domestic skills must one have in order to be able to work with these packaged and prepare at home? I mean, does one have?
It was very easy. There was one sheet of you need to do that. You need to, like a standard and procedure and how do you say it? Step by step how you do it. It was very simple. And I also did videos that I was sending my clients how to do it. You know what I mean? So
sounds pretty simple, and yes, quite appealing actually. Thank you, Marvin. We have another question, a raised hand from Joseph Camilleri. So Joseph, you are allowed to talk.
I have 3 questions, one for Simon, one for Mark Anthony, and the other one for David. I'll start off with Simon. Now that COVID is taking longer, how do you plan on focusing more on the local market? Not just the expats, but the locals themselves. That's my question to you. I'll say all 3 questions and then they can answer. Now, Mark Anthony, recently I saw your magic box. A friend of mine from university showed me how it works, and I must say it's a great idea. Well done. However, on a negative note, Mater Dei kept all the boxes you gave them for themselves. I work in infection control in Gozo. We wouldn't mind having one of your boxes, please. And my third question to David. David, one of the problems we are experiencing in hospitals, I work as a nurse in infection control, is that we're getting very painful ears from wearing the masks all the time. And people are using paper clips to hold back the elastic. And now somebody's come up with an idea of a plastic with hooks.
Yeah, we're actually making quite a few of those for some local healthcare. They're cheap.
I know they're cheap. Our hospital is thinking of buying some. I think around 700 or 800 of them.
That's fine.
I don't know how our procurement can get into contact with you.
Email, phone. At one point, CPSU was calling me at 9 p.m. So
they have, but we're separate from CPSU. Remember, because we're not government owned.
David, may I share your contact details with Joseph?
I can put them in the chat if you want them. It's on the site. It's public knowledge.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Don't find them, ask me, and I will put you through.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. So perhaps you can ask Simon to address this question, please.
Yeah. So thanks for the question first, Joseph. It's true, actually, with Souvenirs that Don't Suck, I feel like we've always had the commodity of targeting a very specific segment of the market, which wasn't locals. And I think the Quarantina collection actually was the first time that we targeted locals on purpose, both in terms of creative, in terms of marketing, from start to finish. That was the objective. However, I have to say, like, I think Marvin is the same. Like, I was listening to Marvin's ideas, and I think the idea that he had with the takeaway with gourmet is also his way of bringing his own take to the takeaway market. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, Marvin, but I really admire that we have something similar. We don't accept the status quo, and if, for example, our brand represents a certain amount of value, I really admire that you try to bring your own value even with the limitations that you had. For us, it's the same. Like, we want to target the local market, obviously, but for us, what is most important, more than anything else, is staying true to our brand and to our values. So definitely, and like obviously, there's more things coming. We're constantly thinking about new ways. We're very lucky to have another brand with Tafit Tazza, which is very local, and to be honest, it has carried us through in a lot of ways during the tough period. But yes, targeting new markets, yes, targeting locals, but always, nothing is more important to us than staying true to ourselves and to our brand.
Yeah. I also, during lockdown in those 2.5 months, every week I was launching a new video on YouTube. There's like 15 or 16 recipes, top recipes, obviously favorite recipes that I shared from A to Z. Some of them are quite interesting as well.
No wonder so many people gain so much weight.
Don't blame me.
Thank you. Mark, I think there was a question for you.
Yes. It's a very interesting question, in fact. The point is that since the product that we developed was intended for a very specific emergency use scenario, it has to be used within a certain context. Remember that such emergency equipment is basically cannot be put on the market for a simple reason that in an emergency scenario, there is no time for certification, because certification will take years, especially on a product such as this, which has safety implications and so on and so forth. Although it's designed with all the safety features we could think of, and we've taken into account a lot of scientific knowledge, at the same time, the end responsibility has to be borne by the end user. So the only way we could find to mitigate the risks was to contact the entity in Malta which has greatest expertise, in-house expertise, on how to use these devices properly. And that was, of course, the state hospital. And they can then decide of how to deploy them in particular scenarios. For example, one of the ways that they're using them is to, they obviously use them for the masks, but they use the masks, they disinfect the masks using these units, and then they store the masks, okay? So before they run through their entire stock of new masks, they will never reuse a mask, okay? First, you need to end up in a scenario where you really have no other option. Rather, it is a last resort option, and it has to be used as such, okay? So that is the reason why we didn't really put it on the market, because otherwise there is a lot of demand for this kind of equipment, and I received phone calls from all over the place, including from other countries. But as I said, it is not as simple as just manufacturing them and putting them on the market. We are in contact with manufacturers who can produce hundreds of these, even thousands, but the concern is the same, okay? It cannot be marketed before it is certified. So at the moment, that is the reason why it is not so widely distributed.
Thank you, Mark. There is a question in the chat box from Kevin Caruana Montaldo, and David answered it by typing back into the chat. So Kevin, perhaps you would like to have a look at the answer there, and if you would like further elaboration, we can discuss that verbally as well. In the meantime, we have questions, hands raised from Kevin, Abdullah, and Joseph Camilleri. Kevin, over to you.
First of all, you're listening now, you're hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I want to thank David because his story and touched me, because every help, regardless quality, is precious during such a crazy and fast pandemic. So I would like to thank him a lot. I have two questions for Christina Bohajar, and the other questions maybe it's a little bit for everyone, but maybe I want to address it a little bit to Simon, because maybe his business is in Valletta, I think, because I saw it. Mela, Christina, it affected me. The thing of online bar, how it works exactly, because nowadays, because of COVID, lots of social gatherings and social distancing. So I found that this idea would help a lot of people, and like the online bar. I would like some more information, and maybe yes.
Christina, just let him ask both questions, please.
Okay, and maybe to Simon or to anybody who can. I'm referring to Simon because it is the locality is in Valletta. Regard the rent of the localities. During this pandemic, it is balanced with the sales. All right, there is the online option, but for a startup, to rent some property in some maybe good location for tourists, it is worth to sell the product and maybe make income, and balance a little bit with, sometimes landlords tend to see entrepreneurs may be going good and maybe they increase the rents. I have some of my friends that they had to close because of these things, because the landlord see them like going good, and after like the contract after 3 years, whatever, he increases such a way that they cannot cope with rent and to balance to their expectations. So I have like this thing to ask.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, for your questions.
Thank
Now,
you very much.
Christina, careful how you answer. You've already let the cat out of the bag by saying you've been attending these online raves, and then you come to work in the morning looking tired and disheveled and blaming it on the PhD.
I'm in online bars, online everything. I mean, Kevin, basically, everything's going online, but what really stimulated this online movement, and I'll share my screen just to show you what stimulated, was this movement, which encouraged everyone to stay at home. So companies got innovative, and this is one of the outcomes of that innovation. It's there so that, I mean, quite a few people live alone. It's like lonely. Even sometimes if you're living with people, you just need, a change of scenery. So it obviously made sense for these people to encourage online social events which keep you connected to society at large. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's happening even inside. Besides Zoom, there are other platforms which kind of cater to online lectures where you can be like a little minion. I tried it out today, Leonie. I'll show you tomorrow.
I suppose this concept of an online bar is, well, you go home and it's 7 p.m. and you have nowhere to go and you feel like a drink, and rather than having a drink in front of the TV,
you just log
to this platform, and there are other people like we are doing here on Zoom, and you can have a drink and have a chit chat with them, right?
Yes, and then it's separated into different bars. For example, then you can choose it according to theme. There's like a fashion bar and where you discuss fashion, a philosophy bar where you discuss philosophy. So it's it's catered to your needs.
Cool. Thank you.
Right.
Simon, the rent problem.
There's no answer that is going to like provide any happy reactions. It's extremely tough. There were a lot of questions in that question. One was about landlords. I think part of being a business owner that you might not learn at school or at university is when you have these tough conversations with landlords, with business partners, with suppliers. You have to have them. It's way better to have these conversations if at the beginning of a rental contract, lease agreement, whatever, you had solid legal advice, and you cannot, like for the example that he brought up, after 3 years he saw a good performance and he skyrocketed the rent. It means that the landlord had the possibility to do that. So I think at the stage where everyone is very happy and everyone wants to sign and pop the champagne and everyone is in that kind of mood is the time where you're setting limits so you protect yourself for stuff like what happened this year. With his question about a startup, we're bang in the middle of Valletta. Obviously, rent is not, it's not easy. I will say, though, that as a business, from our experience as a startup, we started with just having an online presence at the very beginning. And the moment that we had an actual location for clients to pick up orders, and it wasn't just one of us going down in his pajama and delivering a frame, which happened multiple times. When we started getting locations, sales increased, retail, if you, like Marvin said, we experienced the same thing. The day before we closed in February was one of the best days we've ever had in February. It was going really well. And at that time, if you had asked me this question, I would have not even like thought about it. Like, what do you mean? Obviously, it makes sense. Now it's tough. Now, if you look at it in the short term, no, retail doesn't make sense. Owning a restaurant might not make sense. If I could be as lean as possible, I would be as lean as possible. But like part of being in business is taking also the bad side of it, and you cannot allow yourself to dread your situation, you just move on. We've shifted to a very strong online presence, and through that shift, we're managing to support ourselves. Obviously, we have to manage expectations, right? If this year, I don't think anyone, especially in the tourism industry, is thinking about becoming rich. Like this year is all about surviving, holding to your employees if you can, and set yourself for a solid base for better years to come. If you're in business as a startup this year thinking that you're going to, I don't know, become a millionaire over a year, it's not the year for that. Maybe last year or the year before, but in my opinion, not this.
Or even make profit.
Yeah, it's about surviving. Like for us, when we get, like we had a partners meeting 2 days ago. For us, what used to be an absolute failure, maybe last year, this year is, wow, it's a massive success. We're break even, we're surviving. Woo! Like we're
Context and perspective, huh?
Oh my God.
yeah.
Much can change in just a few months.
Yeah, but also something that I learned, final thing, I don't want to overspeak, is being over leveraged as well is something that I learned. We were very lucky that we were not over leveraged in debts and commitments that could have, honestly, like there were times where we were offered locations where we would have paid 4 times as much as we are paying. But we decided, hey, I think we're punching a bit above our weight still. If we hadn't taken that decision at the time, with the banks pushing us to take it, telling us, hey, you can do it, go for it, I don't think that, again, like in perspective, it was the right one.
I agree.
Sorry, Marvin, go on.
I said I agree 100%. I mean, one thing that obviously kept me floating is that I didn't leverage myself, and it's something that it has to be a personal choice that you do. But that was for me, it was whatever the reason why I am still floating. And bear in mind that our restaurants are running on 30-40% of what was running last year. So this is, we didn't fire people left, right, and center. Obviously, there were people that were put not redundant, but because of things that either they didn't do or they did wrong, or things like that we had no choice but to, because obviously they broke their contracts,
Marvin, just to go one last thing, because you mentioned it and I didn't, and I think it's unfair from my side. The assistance that we got from the government also helped us stay afloat, like the wage supplements. We have a particular contact in Malta Enterprise. Like I feel like she's my best friend sometimes. They actually call you to see how you're doing. Like it's crazy. So like I feel like I should mention also that it's not just us being very good and making the online shift. We also have a lot of support here.
If it wasn't for the government, and from here I would like to thank whoever made certain decisions, but for the decision, obviously, to help keep all the employees and they pay a part of the wage was a very, very good thing. And also, I believe that the vouchers helped a lot as well. Obviously, not in my case, because it did help a lot. Don't take me wrong, but obviously, just now that I opened the new restaurant on Royal, I mean that would have been excellent if it was not 2 weeks ago that I opened it, but 2 months ago when there was the vouchers being used,
Yeah.
Yes, both very important points, and agreed that the government incentives and grants have been invaluable for many businesses. We are organizing a webinar, a 2-part webinar. The first part is tomorrow from 3 to 5. The next part is on the following Thursday from 3 to 5. And the speakers will be different stakeholders in the ecosystem, including people from Malta Enterprise, speaking about the grants and incentives on offer. So those of you who haven't yet registered and are interested, please let me know. Simon, you have a comment really, not a question, in the Q&A box from Neville Paris. He says, Mr. Bohajar, I admire your activity because I like Maltese culture a lot. Therefore, translating, using and selling stuff under a Maltese branding name is a plus, I believe. If I may add, to target more Maltese buyers, I would have a good look at what are the Maltese characteristics, such as politics, traditional food, etc. For example, using famous phrases politicians used and use them on t-shirts in a COVID ambient. So thank you, Neville.
Actually, if I may, don't call me Mr. Bohajar. Like, please call me Simon. It really hurts. Two, I love the comment. Actually, we have these conversations a lot. Just to take it a bit on a serious note, going in politics, going in religion, and such stuff is always something. I think I am one of the most in the team who's like, I can be very like jokey and sometimes inappropriate, but when it comes to business, I'm really scared, because I think as much as I believe that having
Simon, you've just...
Sorry, I muted myself. Having enemies in business is not necessarily a bad thing, but there's also a limit. So it's something that we're always very cautious about.
I want to add something that Simon said about startups and Malta Enterprise. Right now, the banks are not taking any risks. They're not giving out loans easily because we tried, because we're in the weird situation of where we're growing as a team. We're in a bigger place, we're more people. And the banks are just not having it. They don't want to pitch in, regardless of how well we've done this past year. The banks will not sort of help in that sense, unless you've had an amazing turnover, which as a growing startup, you just don't. Because most of our turnover goes to more machinery, more equipment, wages. You know, everyone who has a startup knows that cash flow is the most important thing.
Dave, from our experience, I really believe in private investors. Like, sometimes it's a really uncomfortable situation where you have a baby and you have to, like, it's almost like you're giving it out for adoption. But if you find a good private investor who can also add value to your business, I think it's a way better option than banks who just, like you said, the moment things go bad and you skip one payment after, I don't know, like after you do 36, they're not your friends.
Well done, Simon. You're right, David. Sorry.
I mean, even Malta Enterprise. I mean, because you mentioned the startup, I think right now is not a very good time to start a startup. As someone in a startup, so we're in our second year. We just closed off our second year as a startup, and I really think that, first of all, if you're going to start a business, do not start betting on Malta Enterprise funding, because our B-Start funding took 9 months to come in, and our quarterly payments still are taking their time. So in that sense, if we were betting on that, we'd be dead in the water for sure. As Simon said, you focus on online nowadays. You can't rely on people to walk into your shop asking for things. They're just afraid to go out at this point. So a good online presence, some good ads, and just focus on the social media aspects.
Dave, I just disagree, but in a very light-hearted way, about not a good time to start a startup. I don't think such a time exists. I think maybe it's not a good time. If you have a full-time job, don't leave it now and depend on your startup. Maybe do it as a side hustle. And that I get. But I do believe that just like now, you also have advantages. Like now, you could come to Marvin, offer him, or to me, or I don't know, and offer something that might increase sales. And maybe a year ago, we would have said, listen, I don't have time, send me an email, and maybe we'll see. But this year, everyone listens. Everyone is irking for opportunities and ideas. So like with all the negatives, there's also some positives.
depends on the type of startup, like you said. It has to be something innovative, cutting edge, that's really going to change.
Agreed,
Yeah.
100%. And Simon, you're saying that if you have a full-time job, now might not be the time to leave it, but many people have actually lost their jobs. So maybe now is the time to focus on something that has been on their back burner and they didn't have the time and they didn't have the will to work on it before because they were in a comfortable situation. Whereas now, if they have time on their hands, now could actually be the perfect time to start conducting research and setting their plan in motion.
Agreed, 100%. I'd say, I mean, I don't know if I need to say this in a entrepreneurial background, but no matter what you do, don't rest on COVID weight supplements or think that this is going to go on forever. Like, now is the time to work, not the time to rest and think that you have like 6 months off.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, I have two attendees with their hands raised. So Joseph Camilleri, I'm giving you the mic.
Thank you. One last point that I wanted to make, and questions to ask. This it's basically for the whole panel, but COVID is not going to go away tomorrow, and basically, with the increase of COVID throughout Europe, we're facing yet another wave of shortages of PPEs. So, keeping that in mind, I believe that Mark, we will use your box. Don't you worry. But I'm speaking from experience because we're struggling to get PPEs. Ever since the increase in cases, the demand has gone up, obviously, and the suppliers even have increased their prices from abroad. So, but what plans do each of you have? Because COVID is going to take at least till next December, not this coming December, the one after that. That's more than a year away. Because basically, even if we get the vaccine, say February, March, it's still going to take a long time to get it delivered and actually to the people who need it. So we're looking at another year. Are you prepared as businesses and for this length of time? Because no matter what the government says, it will take that long.
Yes. Very true. I agree. And for this reason, we spent the previous summer thinking ahead of how we could mitigate future shortages, as you are describing. We have started work on coming up with a mass-produced version of our product, and we're coming up with a new design that can be mass-produced. But again, the problem is this: unless there is an appetite for government in particular and the authorities to facilitate the process towards certification of certain products, we're still looking at timescales which may very well exceed the horizon of COVID, and then it would be pointless coming up with a product whose sales can only be can only materialize after the emergency portion vanishes. So it's a bit of a difficult situation. In some scenarios, for example, I'm sure you all remember the alcohol rush. Everybody was trying to buy these sanitizers. There were derogations in place where allowances were made for companies who weren't registered manufacturers of these kind of alcohol disinfectants to quickly reorganize and produce these products with a simplified process. Unfortunately, this hasn't been extended to many other sectors, and perhaps that would be one way how to speed up this thing. Because if it's an emergency, I would expect that the certification processes would also treat it as such and speed up the process to to come up with solutions.
Are there local certification boards, and Mark?
The problem is the way it's currently put together is that if you have a device which is classified as a medical device, class 1, class 2, class 3, that kind of device has to be investigated and certified by what's called a notified body. And there is only one notified body, and it's not in the area of medical instruments, medical equipment here in Malta. So that becomes a bit of a problem. And besides, it is still a long process and then also an expensive process. So unless you have hard sales on a product which will probably not have use beyond this current emergency, then it becomes a bit of a difficult calculus for an investor to look at, unless obviously we start looking at the next pandemic. But that's a different story.
Please no.
Please no.
Exactly.
I was muted. I said it before you, Simon.
Exactly.
I think we can all agree that please.
Yes.
Can I just, like he said, are you ready for another year of COVID? I think another year of COVID is going to present a very different Malta than what we're used to. I don't think a lot of businesses, I think it's the exceptions that are going to answer yes, honestly, as pessimistic as that might sound. Another whole year is tough.
Very difficult. But it's likely.
It's quite likely.
I mean, yes, but like the answer is, if you talk to the businessmen, the small business people, they're edging and trying to get past February, March, hoping that everything is going to get back to normal for a summer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my bubble with retail and restaurants near me, but another year is it's not a nice prospect.
Yes, everybody is suffering with the so-called COVID fatigue, but
Yeah.
even members of society who aren't running businesses are also experiencing it, and perhaps they would be more willing to try different things, including more shopping online, also from local retailers, buying their ready-made, prepared meals in plastic containers and heating them at home so that they can get as close as possible to the experience while still maintaining the distance, the online bars and whatever it is. We're all learning by doing here, it's all a matter of constant adaptation. And I think another question I wanted to ask you all is, how important do you think an entrepreneurial mindset is, even for somebody who is not an entrepreneur? So earlier we mentioned people who have lost their jobs, and this could be an opportunity for them to think about possibly starting a business. But not all these people have ever had the desire or the intention to start up a business. But what else could they do? How else could thinking like an entrepreneur, but not necessarily to start up a business? What is your take on that?
I think in many cases it sort of has to be in you. You can't. I can't imagine someone who doesn't have an entrepreneurial mindset pushing himself into an entrepreneur. It's possible, but it sounds very difficult.
Yes, but we try to encourage. The mindset is something that one can learn to acquire, learn to develop, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that if you are in a difficult situation, try to push yourself to develop the entrepreneurial mindset, even if you are not going to start up a business. But that may help you find a different opportunity, wherever that may be.
My idea is that whoever has, and my suggestion to whoever has an idea, they go to a friend of theirs who's a lawyer, or they go to a law firm. They make a non-disclosure agreement, and obviously to protect their idea, and they will start looking for people like Simon and like myself and like all the business people that like Simon said before are so open to we are so exposed right now that we are looking and searching ways of how to make something happen, and we are struggling a lot right now. And I've done a lot of things in the last 6 months that I would never ever considered of doing. But obviously, with all the negatives that COVID brought, it brought me so much positive things. It's unbelievable. I bought myself a small vineyard in Budapest where I will start my own production of wine. I've also started doing small jars of different jarred food, jarred fruit, excuse me, and products line. I've started a product line. So David, you are right to a certain extent, but I think that the suggestion that myself would give to whoever has had that already something in their mind that they wanted to do, and maybe they're not entrepreneur, they make they get a friend of theirs as a lawyer, and they organize a non-disclosure and some sort of a protection for them that they will be able to go forward to investors to be able to start their own project. But also, they also need to go to investors, and apart from investors, they also need to have somebody that will be able to, if they are not entrepreneurial themselves, and which I'm sure that everybody will become once they have their own thing going, they will open a place that's in our mind that will make them entrepreneur. This is what I believe. Maybe I'm being too positive, but this is what I believe. Maybe not everyone, but the majority. And when I speak, I try to speak on majority and on a bigger percentage.
Just picking up on what you said about having this spirit and being an employee as well. I think they're not mutually exclusive concepts. I think if you're employed by someone who's confident, secure, and actually wants to empower you, you being entrepreneurial, coming up with ideas, trying to go a bit the extra step all the time is gonna just do you good, and you're just. And I speak from experience. One of our employees is now going to start a franchise in Poland with our brand. Like she resigned, but when she resigned, we're now like best of friends. We keep chatting all the time. We keep rolling ideas to each other. Why, like, it's not always possible, but I'd say if your boss or your employer feels threatened when you're coming up with new ideas and when you're trying to be entrepreneurial,
you had the wrong job.
Yeah. I was trying to say it in a nicer way, but it's just, yeah. I would move ASAP.
In that sort of situation, two things are very important: trust and integrity. So the trust has to be both ways, and the integrity, that once you give that person your trust, then you don't backstab.
Exactly.
And that is, I think, the foundation of any relationship, including in business. We are getting quite close to the end of this discussion. There are 9 minutes to go, and there's one other student who has their hand raised. So Kevin, I am going to give you the mic.
Good afternoon. Just a very quick question. I know Simon and Marvin have already answered it, but I would have liked to push it through. It's basically, since you've been through this challenging time, how has it changed your relationship with your employees? And do you perceive an increase in the employee loyalty?
So, Simon, I will start this answer because I see you still on mute. So basically, yes, some of the employees I became closer, and some of the employees I haven't. It's just, at the end of the day, it's all about energy and chemistry. And if you are the person that that your employee or your employer have the same energy, then it's going to even flourish. But if you are not on the same level of energy and chemistry, then obviously it's going to go the other way around. So it's all about this. You know what I mean? It's you know, I need to be careful also what to say. I believe that I've learned to chew my tongue more. I was a very outspoken chef. I've done things that I regret today in the kitchens. Poor chefs that used to work with me in the past, and but now I've learned so much from this that you need to, as Simon was saying earlier, listen to your staff and understand whether the chemistry and the energy is actually compatible. And once you realize and understand whether it is or it's not, then it's going to the destination, and you take the journey yourself.
I agree 100%. At times, especially in the beginning with COVID, you almost feel not almost feel, you feel a responsibility, or at least I think most people who were employers felt a responsibility to care for your employees and to make sure that they're okay. And that was the first thing that a lot of people did. Once people did that and people realize, hey, Simon actually it doesn't just care about my shift or my designs, or he actually cares, asked me if my family is okay, how we're doing, what we can do to help each other. Once that happened, now it's easier for them to understand that on the tougher discussions where we're being a bit harder and expecting a bit more, they know that, hey, this is not me coming at you personally because I have some bone to pick with you. It's just I care about the business, you're part of it, and I want you to be better. As long as there is like you said before, as long as there's that trust and understanding, this hasn't broken any relationship that wasn't going to break anyway. Maybe it just made the process faster, because when you go through such a tough period, relationships tend to break or get stronger quicker.
Thank you.
We went through a similar sort of thing because we were pulling stupidly long hours from 8 a.m. till 10, 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. We had these midnight McFlurry runs. You can imagine how long we were at the office for and putting things together. Our break was going to McDonald's at 2 a.m. for a McFlurry. And that happened every day for a long time. But it put us so close together. We had volunteers who came in, not expecting anything, to put together these visors. One of the volunteers became an intern, who now is an employee. There was this trust and relationship built between us and the whole 3D printing community, at least most of them in Malta, which to this day is brilliant. We, as a company, we're quite down to earth. I mean, we play PlayStation every week. We game with our friends. It's we're still quite a young company. I'm 27. I'm the oldest one here. My wife's 28. But this is what we do. We're working on gaming PCs, and we built this trust during that period in that tiny office, which even when we speak to each other, we're talking about our personal lives. It's not work. The work things is just what has to be done, obviously, because it's not a charity, you need to work. But it's such a personal relationship. It's almost like
I'll share, Dave, a challenge that I faced, especially last year. We were very similar to you. And today I realize there's always this tough balance, this impossible balance, I would say, between being friendly and being almost brotherly with your employees. But then the moment that you have to speak out, you have to balance it out. And this balance is something that I struggle with. It's that one thing that when they tell me, have you got it sorted? I say, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's how I feel.
Yes. It's not a bad thing, though. It's not a hugely bad thing that you need to find that balance of, like you said, speaking to them as a friend and speaking to them as their boss.
It's tough. In startups, it's way easier for us because obviously we're 11 people, 12 people. So like for me, I know everyone's name, surname, family. With Marvin, I'm sure it's what I said as a problem for him is way worse.
I still know everybody's name.
Impressive.
Yeah,
I have over 100 people working for.
Impressive, Marvin.
No, trust me. I understand what you just said, David. It has been extremely difficult because during the pandemic, some of my team contacted me personally, and they were really in a bad place, and 30% of my time was helping my team. You know what I mean? And it wasn't easy. It was decisions that I would like to from here thank my wife, Alison Gauchi, that she opened her hands and her heart, and she agreed with my decisions to help people that were working for us, for some of them 2 months and some of them 10 years. You know, so it was very difficult times.
So I'm very conscious of time. We have 2 minutes left. So before we wrap up, I'd just like to share my screen with you again. And there are a couple of interesting comments that were typed into the Q&A. I'm not sure who had the possibility to see them, but I quite like this suggestion from Christina Bohajar, who suggests that the 3 guests can join forces. The idea would be that people eat at Marvin's restaurant, where he would offer them a souvenir from Souvenirs That Don't Suck after their meal, which would be produced by David's Invent 3D.
Fantastic idea. And Leonie, please let me just tell you that an hour ago I sent you an email and I suggested this as well. Open your inbox and it will be there. I've invited all the guests for dinner and I've thanked you very much. And I really thought that I was going to be helping in this panel, but the only person that gained from the panelists, I feel that I was the one gaining and you guys were the one giving.
Thank you, David. Marvin, we all did, and I'm sure that the attendees did as well. We had a few other questions that were answered through the chat, so hopefully those of you who typed your questions into the Q&A have access to the answers from the panelists. It is right 8 o'clock sharp. So on this note, I would like to sincerely thank especially our panelists for sharing your amazing stories, your drive, your energy, your passion. You're very inspiring to hear your experiences. Thank you for sharing them with us, and thank you also to our attendees for joining the discussion and for coming forward with your questions. If you're not following us on Facebook, please do. You have the link here on my conclusion slide. We post regular updates about not just our courses, but also about our events and activities. We're quite active in the entrepreneurship and creativity and innovation scene. So if you'd like to stay updated, please like us, follow us, and we'll be happy to keep you posted.